Savage Nation is playing the Russian national anthem today. We are thanking God for Russian meddling in the last election, and we are thankful that they saved us from Hillary Clinton. And if we had the power, we would award them medals for meddling in our election, doing something that the Republicans failed to do on behalf of the American people. Welcome to the program. If Jonathan Swift were alive, he wouldn't have done a better opening than I just did. This is so clear to me what this is. Why do you think the indictments against these Russians were dropped today on a Friday before a 3-day weekend, while America is still recoiling in shock from the mass shooting of children in Florida? Why? Why would this FBI do this to us today? The answer is clear. Because the FBI failed to stop the shooting when they could have done so. The Florida governor, Rick Scott, is calling for the FBI director to resign in the wake of the Florida school shootings. The FBI is admitting that the protocols were not followed after a tip on January 5th about the Florida school shooting suspect. They were called. Someone close to the shooter named Cruz called the FBI's tip line on January 5 with info about Cruz's desire to kill people, his erratic behavior, disturbing social media posts, as well as the potential for him to conduct a school shooting, and the FBI did nothing. So the FBI failed us because they were very busy trying to indict Donald Trump. And in failing us, they now released this, I wouldn't say fallacious report on Russian meddling in the election, but this ludicrous report, not fallacious but ludicrous. Ludicrous in the sense that there's no meat there. What are they actually saying? Mueller accuses Russians of pro-Trump, anti-Clinton meddling. What is that all about? It's to cover up their own failures in not stopping the school shooting. Moreover, it is one of the most insensitive drops I've ever seen in American history. America is recoiling in horror from the school shooting. The bodies, some of them are still laying there in the morgue. And this insensitive, callous, CIA, FBI, NSA, who is it? Who actually makes a decision to do a thing like this after the school shooting? Who made this decision? It certainly isn't Rosenstein. It couldn't be old Rosenstein who did it. You think Mueller made this decision? What's the difference who made the decision? I mean, I've told you why I think the indictments came down today against the Russians. It's to cover up the FBI's failings in not stopping the school shooting in Florida. But I'll ask you a bigger question, which is does today's press conference by Mueller's surrogate, Mr. Rosenstein, change your view of Donald Trump? And while you're thinking about that, let me ask you another question. What did the Russian trolls actually do? Well, who knows? A whole list of things that they did. What do I know what they did? What did they actually do? They worked in a front company. They act like trolls. They put out bad stuff about Hillary. They put out stuff that pit people against each other. Is that any different than Black Lives Matter itself? Is it any different than what Nancy Pelosi does every time she opens her mouth? Is it any different what that failed Knish on television, Jimmy Schimmel, does every time he gets up on television acting like a pimp for the Democrat Party? Actually like a prostitute for the Democrat Party. All these late-night hosts are prostitutes for the Democrat machine. You're telling me they're not engaging in propaganda? Well, they are, but they're allowed to do it. They're protected by the First Amendment. So that brings me to the next question, which is this. It's actually a statement, not a question. And that is, we are told over and over again that illegal aliens from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador are afforded all the protections of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, even though they're not. We're told they are because they're in America. But wouldn't that also apply to Russians in America? In other words, if a Russian's in America and we're told that foreign nationals, once they're in America, have all the rights of Americans, wouldn't they also have First Amendment rights to publish anything they want? I'm just asking. Just a question. See? All the illegals are afforded protection, as well as Americans. Why not the Russians? So those are some of the ideas. I mean, I was going to talk today about the shooting, the failure of the FBI. I wasn't even going to do, I was going to make it a little different than that. I was going to go back to something I started yesterday, which was Michael Savage and his high school rifle team. And I was going to give you a portrait of America in the 1950s when the country was sane. And I'm going to show you that boys in my high school had guns. We were given guns to use during the school day, at target practice, in the basement of Jamaica High School in Queens, New York. But every borough had a high school with a rifle team and a rifle range. And no one ever shot themselves. No one ever ran through the halls with their rifles and killed anybody. What was different in the 1950s than today? For one, deranged comedians like Jonas Schimmel weren't on television. Somebody like that would have been in Creedmoor Mental Hospital pretending to be a late-night comedian. The filth and the violence coming out of the mouths of Hollywood was not permitted in America. It was not allowed. The around-the-clock filth and violence coming out of the sickest minds of our generation just didn't happen. It was limited to porno theaters. The stuff that Hollywood now produces in terms of sex violence, etc., was restricted to underground pornography theaters. You're telling me this has no effect on the minds of our children? Now throw in what I've been talking about for at least 20 years now, psychoactive drugs, which the children are being given on a regular basis. From morning until night, they're put on medication. Now, medication can be very helpful. It has saved people's sanity and saved people's lives. But in some cases, it's driven them over the edge. There is a huge literature on the connection between certain SSRIs, certain receptive types in the human community, and their inability to process the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors in a proper manner, which yields a terrible, terrible quantity of incidence of suicide and homicide. You're not hearing any of that, and the reason you're not hearing any of it is because of the interlocking corporate directorships, which I described on this show yesterday, something well beyond the average talk of talk radio. I'm not trying to boast. I'm just telling you. It's already, outside the ken. In other words, if a person sits on the board of the pharmaceutical firm that makes the medication that has high association with violence and suicide, and then they sit on the board of, let us say, a major news organization that owns Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or ABC or CBS, and the same people are on the same boards as the drug companies, you're never going to hear this from any of the talking heads on CNN, Fox, or MSNBC, because they don't want to interfere with the income that they're gaining from the other corporation that the person sits on. So you haven't heard any of this about the dangers of drugs and what drug this kid was on. This latest shooter, as sure as I'm sitting, was on drugs. We know it for a fact because one of the friends of the family said he was being treated with medication. So that's a long way of saying we're living in very confusing, dangerous, sick times. For this Rosenstein, Mueller's puppet, to come out and drop this indictment today, accusing Russians of pro-Trump, anti-Clinton meddling, it's basically a PR piece from the Clinton campaign that is made specifically for the Sunday talk shows. So those with low intelligence quotients who run the Sunday talk shows will repeat the mimeograph that just came out from Mueller. They have the mimeograph in their hand from Mueller, and they're ready to read it on Sunday. All of the fraudulent people on the Sunday talk shows, that's all they're going to say. But they're going to leave out what I'm about to play for you. Even Rosenstein himself. Rosenstein, the lawyer, who works for Mueller, the lawyer. It's always lawyers. Why is it always lawyers who are doing such slimy things? Well, that's a topic for a psychiatrist, not for me, of those who go into the legal profession, except my lawyers who are mentally sound. Rosenstein specifically states today, which will not be played on Sunday by any of the fakers, there is no allegation in the indictment that was laid down today that the outcome of the election was altered. That's something that even Rosie O'Donnell can understand. I don't know if Barbara Streisand will get the message. I doubt very much that Maxine the Dolt Waters will get the message. I'm sure Nancy Pelosi's medication today will not permit her to even hear that. But listen carefully so you hear it clearly and loudly on the Savage Nation.
Now, there is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election.
You hear that, Maxine Waters? Maxine, pay very careful attention before you shoot your big mouth off. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the election. No allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant. So what is it about then? If no Americans were involved, then why grandstand with an indictment today on Friday of indicting foreign nationals? There's only one reason. Because the FBI itself should be indicted for failing to have stopped the school shooting the other day. They had the evidence, they had the warning, it was January 5th, and they dropped the ball. Therefore, the best way for them to cover up their massive failings is to come out with this nothing, zero indictment against Russians. Now, I don't know what the Russians did. I don't know who the Russians are. I don't really know how serious it is. I know that many people meddle in elections. I know for a fact that Barack Hussein Obama had operatives meddling in the Israeli election. Did you know that? Oh, you didn't hear that one. You didn't get that memo from the FBI? You didn't hear that memo that he sent little stooges over from New York's worst leftist communes to Israel and other countries, by the way, to lobby against the election of Netanyahu because Obama hates Netanyahu, hated Netanyahu, in fact, hates the concept of Israel. Netanyahu is too much of a nationalist for him. He would have liked a Palestinian to run Israel and to disappear the Jews altogether, and that would have given Obama a wonderful, wonderful new Nobel Prize. But nevertheless, the big point is that Obama meddled clearly, well-known fact, in Israeli and other elections. Why was there no indictment? Because he's allowed to do that. Why is he allowed to do that? I'll let you figure it out as I take my first short break on the home of God, faith, and reason, because only God can save us from the evil that lurks in man's heart.
Join